It's really bright. I'm gonna put on my sunglasses. So, this one, it's gonna be about kind of weapons, fighting styles, martial characters. I've touched on these topics before, but before when I talked about fighting styles, I meant from a like narrative, how you describe it kind of perspective. Here, I mean the mechanic fighting style in D&D 5e, and weapons that go along with it. First, whenever I see fighting style, I don't think, uses a big weapon. To me, fighting style means something slightly different, but in the context of the game, most of the fighting styles are really weapon-centric instead of like terms you might use in boxing or some other martial arts like infighter, outfighter, interception specialist. Even though interception is a fighting style, but it doesn't mean exactly the same thing in that context, because an interception-based martial art is, I'm not an expert on such a topic, but I've got a little grounding here. Like an interception-based martial art is one where you are attempting to intercept your opponent and hit them whenever they come in to attack you. Generally. Things like that. So that's like, for me, when I think of the word or the phrase fighting style, that's what pops into my mind. But that is very little to what I'm actually going to start talking about, because I just wanted to get that out. Anyway, so when it comes to weapon style or weapon choices and mechanical fighting styles in 5e, there's a few different options, and for the most part, the weapon, I'm going to boil them down into like weapon sets, and they come down to single weapon, like a single one-handed weapon, usually with a shield, but not always, depending on whether your character gets shields. But single one-handed weapon, single two-handed weapon, two-weapon fighting, thrown weapons, which are variations on single weapon and two weapons, or two-weapon fighting, and then basically just ranged weapons. Because most ranged weapons are also two-handed weapons that just have range. And they're slightly different. They have some slightly different rules, and they have some different, and they can only really benefit directly from the archery fighting style, which just says you get extra to hit bonuses. But why is there always road work wherever the hell I go? No matter what. What the hell, man? Well, at least today. Not always, just like today. Where the hell am I gonna go? Whatever, I'm gonna keep recording this video because I don't want to stop it, and I can't use my GPS at the same time because of this phone. Okay, so all these different the different fighting styles you have available to you, like dueling, defense, great weapon fighting, two-weapon fighting style, they all just slightly modify what, they give you small passive bonuses kind of here and there to accentuate certain weapon styles. And this is also a big thing, that without feats, they're all pretty close to each other. But as soon as you add Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master, Sharpshooter, and Crossbow Expert into the mix, then the only weapons worth using become hand crossbows and strength-based two-handed weapons, more or less. There's some outliers, and there's ways you can make other things like other weapon setups competitive, but those selections of feats and stuff are far and away the simplest, most direct, and then still usually like the highest damage, to my understanding of the system. But without feats, then a sword and board, sword and shield guy using the dueling fighting style has around the same average damage as somebody using a big two-handed great axe or great sword. Then also with the then two-weapon fighting also hits around that same average benchmark after level 5. Before level 5, two-weapon fighting is the best. It's just, that's, because with like the same ability score, or like the same offensive ability score of like, let's say an 18, so you've got +4. With dueling, before level 5, you're doing what? 4.5 plus 2, so 6.5 plus 4, so 10.5. Great Axe is doing 6.5 plus 4, 10.5. A Great Sword is doing 11 technically, or 11 because it's 3.5 plus 3.5 plus the 2d6, blah blah, numbers. But then two-weapon fighting, like two short swords, because two-weapon fighting can only be used with light weapons. If you're doing that, then it's 3.5 plus 4, so 7.5 times 2, because you get 2 attacks, so 7.5 plus 7.5, 15. And that's before level 5. So that's, two-weapon fighting at that range without feats. Two-weapon fighting is, quote, the best, the highest damage, as long as you're utilizing the appropriate, the appropriate matched fighting style. Two-weapon fighting has other issues that I'll get into in a bit. But this sequence? The hell? Sequence? It's not a sequence. More or less, right here, then at level 5, when you get extra attack, now everything doubles, except two-weapon fighting. Now, the sword and board, let's just assume ability scores are the same. So sword and board, great axe, great sword, they all double to, sword and board and great axe, they double average damage to, 21? Yeah, they double to 21. Great sword goes to 22 because 0.5s. And then two-weapon fighting just gets a third attack, adding an additional 7.5 to 15. So that goes to like 22.5. So it's still, on average, the best by 0.5 damage. So without feats, two-weapon fighting is competitive. It does function properly. Or it is the highest damage choice. The problem is, two-weapon fighting takes up your bonus action, which is a big investment for a lot of characters. And especially, the only two, outside of multi-classing, the only two character classes that get the two-weapon fighting style that let you use it optimally. Because if you're not using the fighting style, Great Sword beats this damage. And so then it loses to everything else in the damage race. The only two classes that get access to the two-weapon fighting style are Fighter and Ranger. And technically Blood Hunter, but Blood Hunter actually has even more synergy problems with it. But I think, unless it got updated, I didn't notice. But because if you're using your bonus action, then then Fighter, which usually has some stuff to do with their bonus action, like either their second wind, certain subclasses get bonus action abilities, and then Rangers have lots of different spells that you use as their bonus action. They'll get Ensnaring Strike, they'll get a bunch of different stuff. They'll get the classic Hunter's Mark. They get a lot of different things like that. So overall, not great. There's like a negative synergy there. So the only two types of characters that can use two-weapon fighting most effectively without multi-classing or feats to gain a fighting style, which I think is a really expensive feat. Because you can just take a level in fighter and you're probably much better off. Overall, not amazing. So that's the issue there. Like, sure, for those characters, it is technically the most damage, but you have to give up your bonus action to do it, so it's not great. Then, when you take feats into account, two-weapon fighting starts to fall way behind. It's still technically better than dueling, but with dueling, like, let's say dueling doesn't take any feat, and instead they just, like, if you're just using a sword and board, you don't need any specific feats to, like, max out your damage, more or less. Like, there's feats you can take, but there's nothing, like, explicitly that's for a single-handed weapon that really pushes your damage to some sort of maximum, which I think is a shame, but it's a separate thing. Unless you're using it with a spear, it's a different issue, or a different thing. But let's just assume it's like a sword. So in that case, yeah, they don't have to spend a feat, so let's say they spend an ASI and getting their offensive, like their strength, to 20. So then their average damage goes up from 21 to 23. Because now they're adding +5 instead of +4 to both attacks. Okay, well, let's say in that same scenario, the two-weapon fighter takes the dual wielder feat. So now they can use versatile weapons. They don't have to use light weapons. So their average damage also goes up by 2. Then they gain +1 AC for using 2 weapons. So they have the same average damage as this as the person using dueling, but they have less AC. And it's also, two-weapon fighting is also more expensive because you have to have 2 weapons. It's not just, you don't have just, like, friggin' one weapon and shield or just one large weapon. You just have 2 weapons and you have to invest in both of them just to make that second or third attack. Outside of that, then also in that same period, that great weapon, that two-handed heavy weapon dude, he grabs great weapon fighting and he just shoots ahead of everybody. His average damage, and I'm not worried about to hit here, because even if you do factor into hit most of the time, it still works out better. There are edge cases, but again, I'm not worried about it. That great weapon guy, his damage shoots way the fuck up by an additional 20 points. His damage basically doubles. His average damage just about doubles, just under doubles. And again, I'm not factoring into hit, but I'm not worried about that right now. Not part of this. Not super part of this discussion. But anyway, so what do you do? Do you do anything about this? A lot of the time, sometimes you won't have players that do anything with, like, two-weapon fighting. If you do, sure, then take care of it. But if not, don't worry about it. But something I something that I stated is, if there's something that a player wants to do, but they feel, like, say they want to play a Berserker Barbarian, and they feel the subclass is too weak, we can talk about that. If I'm the DM, we can discuss that. But I'm not going to just say, like, hey, I did this rework of this class. Oh, no one wants to play it? Okay, cool. Like, I'm only going to fix something if somebody, like, really wants to use it, if it's perceived as weak. But I like two-weapon fighting, so... And also, in the game I'm DMing, that one of the players is using two-weapon fighting. And in one of the games I'm playing, I'm using two-weapon fighting. So the way we're mostly fixing it is everything works pretty much the same, but if you have the 2-weapon fighting style, then you don't have to use a bonus action to do your offhand attack. That's about it. It keeps everything pretty much in line. And this is another factor. Like, it depends on your table. In that table where I'm playing a 2-weapon fighting ranger, we're not super high, min-maxy, get as much damage as possible. Nobody's using great weapon fighting. If there was a player with great weapon fighting, then, or if I were just playing in a table where that was a thing, then I would either change it or advocate for allowing the dual wielder feat to just allow extra attack to apply to your offhand weapon. So then you would get 4 attacks. And that still puts it a little behind great weapon fighting or great weapon master. But it's closer. It's a bit closer, and you've got you can use weapons that have like specific riders, like extra die or chances to do stuff. You can go for a slightly different flavor of build and get different stuff, and it can work. The damage is still pretty high, and it's a good deal ahead of dueling now, which would also require some tune-up. And again, it's all on a case-by-case basis. Like, in that game I'm DMing, there's certain things, like, certain boundaries of certain rules that don't feel exactly right, but most of the time you enforce them because you have to leave the rules as rules are rules. Like, eventually, like, you could always argue for a little bit more if you change the rules every time. But, like, there's this one case. My one player is using 2-weapon fighting with a pair of spears. And instead of taking the dual wielder feat to lift the light restriction, they took this goofy homebrew spear feat, which is pretty strong. I think it adds a +1 bonus to hit when you're using spears, and it increases their damage die from a D6 to a D8. And it gives you some weird bonus action nonsense you can do. So it's pretty strong, but what do you call it? It's not like crazy strong. He's definitely the highest, like, martial damage dealer, but he's also the only martial character, like, besides the rogue. So that's a thing. But there was a sequence, first, even though he's not lifting the light restriction in any way, because he invested in that feat, he showed investment in this type of thing. I added onto his homebrew spears. I just threw the light property on them, so it's not an issue. And usually, I kind of consider, like, as long as you have some sort of investment on the character into this kind of concept, it can alleviate certain issues, like using 2-weapon fighting and some sort of spellcaster. That mechanically, rules as written, that doesn't work. You need a free hand to do shit. But if you take either, like, the Warcaster feat, which explicitly removes that restriction of you needing a free hand, or if you take like the dual wielder feat, as long as you're dual wielding, then you can ignore that restriction as well. Like, you wouldn't be able to ignore it if you were using a sword and a shield, but because you showed investment in, like, dual wielding in 2-weapon fighting, then you can ignore that restriction. And I'm doing the same thing, like, in this case. This 2-weapon fighting ranger with 2 spears, he can use these spears, even though they originally weren't light. I decided to change that. They are light now. But if he were to cast a spell, he can do it with the spears. Only with the spears. If he were to replace one of them with a shield, he would need to have a free hand. And then also, another example of, like, kind of pushing the rules a little bit, there was a case where he was up on a 40-foot high wall, and he wanted to throw his spears down at a target on the ground. And he more or less had plenty of actions to do this. He has 3 attacks because he's level 6, so he used 2 attacks to throw him. Then he killed that guy, teleported down with a Misty Step as a bonus action. And then he had the rest of his movement and 1 more attack left after he used his object interaction to pick his spears up off the ground. Which, you know, you've got 2 hands, why can't you just grab both of them again? And again, he has investment in spears and dual wielding. If there was something else, I might not let him do it. But, separate the continuing. Then he used the rest of his movement to run over to a third enemy, or an additional enemy, and use his last attack on that guy. Now, there were 2 instances, or 3 instances where I pushed the rules there. 1, the wall was 40 feet high, and the target was like 10 feet away from the wall. So that enemy was probably like 45, 50 feet away from him. Within, like, you know, the thrown weapon's long range. But I let him roll normally. And in my head, I just decided, yeah, you can just do that. No disadvantage. But if you want to break that down mechanically, well, it could be that being this high up on the wall gives him advantage on the throw, which cancels out the disadvantage for being long range. That's a nice angle on the sun there. So he just makes a normal roll, even though he's at long range. He's got the high ground, so he gets advantage. It cancels out, and I'll probably explain that to him next time I talk to him about it. Then he Misty Stepped down. Now, you know, it's Misty Step has a 30-foot range. It was a 40-foot high wall. He would have had to Misty Step down 10 feet into the air, fall the rest of the way. Take a little bit of fall damage, which I kind of ignored. And the main reason I ignored that was, first time I played with this player, he's played a little bit before. He's a good friend of mine. He was the best man at my wedding. You know, first time he's really played, especially a character like this, and from the bit I talked to him about these kinds of things, probably the first time one of his characters may have been in a situation like this. So, and you know, he's learning. This character is brand new. We finished the character like 3 hours before the session started. So, didn't want to bog him down with too many extra rules, like, oh, well, you're falling a total of 10 feet, blah, 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 so you have to do this, just so you know this will happen. But, so I just let him do it without rolling, like, that D6 for fall damage, which wouldn't have changed the combat in any capacity, because he didn't take that much damage. All it would have been was, he would just take a little bit of damage. And that would have been okay, and would have been the realistic thing to do, because yeah, you take a little bit of damage. But for the sake of speeding the game up and keeping everything flowing, I just kind of ignored it. It's like, yeah, you can Misty Step down to the ground. You're close enough. Like, and willing to bend just a little bit, like usually bend that extra 5 to 10 feet in a lot of cases, helps a lot, I think, keeping the game moving. But you kind of want to set like an arbitrary limit of how far you're willing to bend certain rules. And then the third case was technically picking both spears up off the ground in one turn wouldn't work, because, well, you can only interact with one object as a free object interaction on your turn, which is extremely rulesy and annoying. Like, no, just pick them both up. It's fine. There's no reason you can't. You know where they both are. Like, it's not that big a deal. Which, in other situations, that could be an interesting, like, limitation or something you have to deal with. I was like, okay, yeah, because you did all these things, you can only retrieve one of your spears. Yeah, in certain other cases, maybe I would not allow him to pick up both spears, but in this case I did. It's contextual, and they're always, you got to be willing to make calls like that. And they're really small, minimal things, but I think they go a long way towards helping characters work. And so, in addition, like all these for that particular game, I homebrewed a bunch of guns, which I mostly took existing guns, modified them slightly, made variations of them, things like that. And for the bard character, using a pair of Desert Eagles, the player came up with some really, really hilarious ways to use them. Like, I talked about it in the rambling about that session in particular, but I allowed the player to roll double the damage dice for I'm not exactly sure why. It just like I guess I felt like the damage was going to be low. It was like, yeah, just roll 4d6 instead of 2d6. And it worked out fine because she only shot like 2 enemies, I think. She only used the guns twice, and that's an extra like an extra 2d6 is like an extra 7 damage. It's not changing the world. An extra 14 damage overall for the whole combat encounter. That's not nothing. That's not no damage, but it's not like they were going to die if she didn't get that extra damage for free. So, but in retrospect, yeah, it was a little too high. So, I added a new little feature to those guns, where if the player can describe some sort of like super entertaining way to use the guns, like, come up with a good joke, which I think is what the player, a big part of why the player is playing this type of character, to do that type of shit,